Dawn crept slowly over Bienville Parish, Louisiana. The sky was pale, undecided, and the dirt road cutting through the fields lay empty. Dust hovered low in the air, untouched by traffic. In the tall grass along the roadside, 6 men waited without speaking. They'd been there for hours, barely moving, listening to insects and distant engines, knowing that when the moment came, it would be over in seconds. They were waiting for a car. When it appeared, it came quietly. A tan Ford V8 rolled over the rise, easing downhill like it had done so many times before on so many roads. A young man drove, one hand on the wheel, a cigarette glowing faintly between his fingers. A woman sat beside him, close enough that her shoulder brushed his arm. They moved with the ease of people who had spent years sharing cramped seats, stolen nights, and narrow escapes. Bonnie Parker, Clyde Barrow. The Ford slowed as it approached a stalled vehicle ahead. For a fraction of a second, everything was still. Then the road exploded, rifles cracked in unison. Glass shattered, metal screamed. The Ford jerked violently as bullets tore through it, punching holes through doors, engine and bodies. Clyde died instantly. Bonnie screamed once. The car rolled forward, slid into a ditch and stopped. Just like that, it was finished. Their story ended the way it had lived, sudden, violent and inseparable. But the road to that morning began years earlier, far from Louisiana, in a place where survival mattered more than dreams. West Dallas, 1930, was a hard place built on dust and smoke. Factories churned endlessly, their shadows stretching across streets, where children learned early that nothing was guaranteed. Bonnie Parker grew up there, sharp-eyed and restless, a girl who noticed everything and accepted very little. Her father died when she was still young, and responsibility followed soon after. She did well in school, loved writing poetry, and imagined a life larger than the narrow future waiting for her. The Great Depression crushed those kinds of dreams quickly. Jobs disappeared, families struggled, ambition didn't pay rent. Bonnie learned to rely on charm where opportunity failed. She married young, choosing Roy Thornton, a volatile man already drifting toward crime. Their marriage was loud, unstable, and brief.
Doing what? You wanted this!
Not like this, it's always a fight!
He tattooed both their names above her knee,
It's real
and then
now.
vanished into
I'll be
prison.
back.
Bonnie didn't wait for him. She didn't divorce him either. She simply moved on. That was when Clyde Barrow entered her life. They met in January 1930 at a friend's house without ceremony or warning. Their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them. Clyde was confident, already familiar with trouble. Bonnie saw escape in him. Clyde saw devotion in her. Within days she was cooking for him. Within weeks they were inseparable. Then it stopped. Clyde was arrested in February for a series of burglaries. Bonnie was left behind, writing letters to a man behind bars. When words weren't enough, she acted. In March, she smuggled Clyde a gun.
This is for Clyde. Take it.
All right, hand it
He
over.
escaped briefly, only to be captured again and sent to Eastham Prison Farm. Eastham was designed to break men. Inmates worked under brutal conditions, beaten for slowing down, punished for weakness. Clyde learned quickly that survival required hardness. He was abused, humiliated, and pushed past his limits. Eventually he snapped. With a piece of iron, he killed the man tormenting him. Another inmate took the blame. When Clyde walked free 2 years later, the boy Bonnie had fallen for no longer existed. What returned was colder, focused, consumed by hatred for the prison system and the authority behind it. That hatred gave him purpose. When Bonnie reunited with Clyde in 1932, she saw the change immediately. The easy charm was gone, replaced by something sharper and more dangerous. She stayed anyway. This time it was a choice. They began with small robberies. Grocery stores, gas stations, rural banks with barely any money.
It'll do.
They didn't
We're
get
gone.
rich. They stayed alive. Always moving. Always ahead. Bonnie wasn't chasing wealth. She wanted meaning. She wanted to be part of something that mattered. even if it was built on risk. The Barrow gang formed slowly. Clyde's brother Buck joined. Buck's wife followed. Drifters came and went. Violence
Clyde,
escalated.
something's wrong.
Mistakes
Hands up!
multiplied.
Now! Don't shoot!
In
Hey,
April
get back!
1932 in Hillsborough, Texas, everything changed. A robbery unraveled into panic. Clyde pulled the trigger. A store owner fell dead. There was no going back after that. From that moment on, they were no longer just robbers. They were killers. Bonnie was arrested briefly after a failed job and held in Kaufman County. When she was released weeks later, she went straight back to Clyde. Whatever fear she had left behind in that cell never returned. They crossed state lines, leaving chaos behind them. Officers were killed. Civilians died. Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, each state passed responsibility to the next. By 1933, Bonnie and Clyde were infamous. Newspapers turned them into symbols. To a public battered by banks and broken promises, they looked like rebellion. To law enforcement, they were humiliation. Both versions spread. In April 1933, the gang hid out in a stone bungalow in Joplin, Missouri, pretending to be ordinary tenants. Their behaviour drew attention: loud drinking, arguments, gunfire for sport. Neighbours called police. When officers arrived, they expected bootleggers. Instead, they walked into a gunfight. Bullets tore through walls. 2 officers died before they could react. Bonnie grabbed the car. Clyde and Buck fought their way out. They escaped again. Inside the bungalow, police found undeveloped film. When it was processed, the images spread across the country. Bonnie posing with a cigarette and a gun. Clyde smiling beside her. The photographs transformed criminals into icons. By late 1933, fascination returned to pressure. Governors demanded results. Law enforcement demanded an end. That's when Frank Hamer stepped in. A former Texas Ranger, Hamer didn't chase recklessly. He watched. He mapped patterns. He noticed that no matter how far Bonnie and Clyde ran, they returned to familiar ground, to family, to old connections. Loyalty, he realized, was their weakness. In January 1934, Clyde led a violent prison break at Eastham, freeing inmates and killing a guard. One escapee, Henry Methvin, joined them. Hamer followed that connection to Methvin's family in Louisiana. By spring, a 6-man team was assembled. Quiet, patient. There would be no arrest, only an ambush. Methvin's father agreed to cooperate in exchange for his son's freedom.
I understand. Freedom for your son in exchange for cooperation. No heroics, no loyalty, just survival.
I agree.
Bonnie and Clyde were told to drive down Highway 154, isolated, empty, unavoidable. For 3 days, the officers waited. On the morning of May 23rd, 1934, just after dawn, the Ford appeared. Clyde slowed when he saw the stalled car ahead. The order was given. Rifles erupted. Over 100 bullets tore through the vehicle. Clyde died instantly. Bonnie screamed once. The car rolled into the ditch and stopped. The Ford sat broken at the edge of the road, steam rising gently, as if the machine itself was trying to breathe. The guns went quiet. Birds returned to the trees. Morning carried on, indifferent to what had just happened. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow never reached for their weapons. They never had time. One moment they were driving, planning the next stop, the next meal, the next place to disappear, and the next, they were history. By midday, the road was no longer empty. Crowds gathered, tearing the car apart for souvenirs: hair, fabric, glass, bent metal. The legend was being dismantled before the bodies were even buried. They had outrun the law for years, but they could never outrun the story America built around them. To some, they were ruthless criminals who met a deserved end. To others, they were symbols of defiance in a country that had stopped listening to its people. Bonnie was buried in Dallas. Clyde lay miles away. Together, in death was the one thing they were denied. There was no final speech, no heroic last stand. Just a quiet road in Louisiana, and 2 young lives that burned too fast to slow down. And when the dust finally settled, America was left with a question it still hasn't answered. Were Bonnie and Clyde criminals who became famous, or a nation so desperate for hope that it turned violence into a love story? The road went silent again, but the myth never did.